Leadership Preparation Webinar Series, Values-Based Leadership, Part 2. The Office of Leadership Development and School Improvement is comprised of an executive director reporting to the Assistant State Superintendent, coordinators for school improvement, academic improvement, and leadership development, as well as leadership specialists. Our office has three main goals: fostering the growth of effective leaders, ensuring valid and reliable evaluations, and raising the quality of education. We provide targeted professional learning experiences and resources to equip current and future leaders with the skills and knowledge required for successful school and district leadership. We oversee the development and implementation of Maryland's teacher and principal evaluation system. Training, guidance, and support is provided to local school systems in the implementation of fair and valid evaluations. Lastly, we provide customized professional learning experiences and support informed by data and grounded in effective practices to improve school performance. To earn continuing professional development credit, in order to receive 1 credit, you must view 5 webinars, including Part 1 and Part 2. Additionally, you will complete 3 hours of experiences per webinar to include pre-work, participant guides with the webinar, and extension activities. In order to receive 2 CPD credits, you must watch all the webinars in the series, including Part 1 and Part 2. Then you will complete 3 hours of experiences per webinar to include any pre-work, participant guides with the webinar, and extension activities. In order to submit your materials, please complete the Google form found in the description below the video. Meet the presenters. For this webinar, we partnered with Biza and Associates Consulting, LLC. Presenting today will be Melinda Biza and Lorna Clockengay.
We're so excited to share some great tools that are going to enhance your leadership. As always, we're going to tell a little bit about ourselves. Our company, Biza and Associates, partners with pre-K through 12 organizations and higher institutions that include state departments of eds and universities across the nation, specializing in school transformation and improvement efforts through organizational design that lead to systemic efforts and change. We also facilitate leadership development through executive leadership coaching, principal coaching, and provide customized professional learning.
Our vision is to help inspire school leadership to become transformational change agents. Our purpose is to help school leadership rethink, reignite, and refocus school systems to provide the optimal learning experience for all students to succeed in our ever-changing world.
And as usual, we're confident you're going to find this webinar series very beneficial to your leadership growth. So let's get started.
Values-based leadership, Part 2. Let's jump in. Let's review the expectations and logistics. In this part of the webinar, you will become aware of your top values that influence your behavior to align to a performance-based vision. Your resources are your participant's guidebook. If you do not have that out, please download it now, Part 2. And the only true leadership is values-based leadership article that you read at the end of Part 1 for homework. You will need to reference these resources throughout this webinar. Let's review the agenda. We're going to identify top values, identify how values influence behaviors. We're going to clarify values, and learning through scenarios. In Part 1 of this webinar, you created your leadership story by defining leadership. I hope you shared that with 5 people and continue to refine that moving forward. You established a deeper understanding of the difference between values and vision and why it's important to have both. You compared values, beliefs, and attitudes that supported values-based leadership. Our session's outcome for Part 2 are you will create a performance-based vision incorporating identified top values that influence behaviors that lead to successful values-based leadership. On page 2 of your participant's guide is a values action rating chart. Using your top 5 identified values, as identified in part 1 of this webinar series, you will rank yourself on the actions that reflect these values. I'm sure you have them handy. In the boxes on the left-hand side, write one of your top 5 values in each box. All 5 values will be listed. Take a few moments, and in the second column, rate each value on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 high, how you think each value shows up in your work life. Give an example for each value. Take about 3 or 4 minutes to complete this.
Now remember to start with writing down your 5 values. Is that correct, Lorna?
That's correct. So in the first box, you'll write your value. Let's say that's integrity. And the second box, you would rate that on a scale of 1 to 10, how you think that shows up in your life at work. And so you would give it a rating and then give an example of what behaviors you exhibit that show that integrity is one of your values.
And then on the third column, we're going to wait.
Right. Let's go ahead and do the second column first. You may still be working on that middle section, but let's talk about the last column that Melinda mentioned earlier. I want you to kind of step out of yourself and think about the way other people see you. So in the last column, try to look at yourself and your actions as others might see it. Rate yourself on each value from 1 to 10 as you think others would rate you based on this behavior. For example, each value based on what you think others would see. For example, if I value holding people accountable, others might see me checking in with staff, following through with implementation plans, or following up on lesson plans. So I may rate that as a 9 if those are the things I do. But we want to see how other people perceive your behaviors, because remember, they can't see your values. They can only see your behaviors. So take a few minutes to complete this chart. And if you haven't completed the middle column, do that before you start the third column.
I want to interject here, Lorna, because to me, it's always difficult for me to able to perceive what other people think about me. So consider who your accountability partner is, whether it's your spouse, your partner, your friend, someone at work, and kind of have them or think through what they might think about what you're perceiving.
And sometime after you do this, you may even ask people at work, what behaviors do you see? Because remember, you've identified your top 5 values.
Right.
So you could ask others and see if it aligns with what you think and you write down today.
That's a great idea.
We're going to move on. But one of the other points I want to bring up again that Melinda and I mentioned is I would take this and check out what you think others' perceptions are with certain people you trust at work and see how they think your values show up in your behaviors. It's really a good reality check. I do this every once in a while, even with my business partner, to keep us honest. It's a good accountability partner issue.
I can see how maybe you could do this with your leadership team as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think when you do this, to also think about if your school has a set values, or the district does, or the school corporation, and how does that really align? And would you know that through people's behavior without knowing what the values really were? It's a very interesting and very enlightening exercise. So what do values influence? Remember, they're the core, and so they influence your attitudes and your behavior and your beliefs, but they also influence a leader's preferences and aspirations, perception of situations and problems, and choice behavior in dealing with a given situation. And we'll go more in depth with this as we move through this part of the webinar.
So let's continue. The power of values, or VBP. Values determines behavior, and behavior determines performance. As a leader, you might say that professional learning communities, or PLCs, are imperative for teachers and have a positive influence on student achievement, correct? Sure, teachers are expected to participate in weekly PLC meetings. But what if, as the leader, you never attend a PLC meeting? What message does that behavior communicate to teachers? Are you really valuing PLCs and teacher collaboration? This is one example on how your behavior determines performance. Values should align to your school vision and to your initiatives. Decisions align to values. As priorities and resources change, leaders must make decisions about what's best. Best for teaching, best for learning, and best for students. In your participants guide on page 3, record the questions you think leaders should consider. What questions should leaders consider when deciding what is best? Brainstorm 2 to 3 questions on your participants guide, part 2, page 2. Fantastic. Let's come back together. I would encourage you to keep a running record of questions that will guide what is best deemed for you, your staff, your students, and your organization. Let's turn to the handout of your participants guide and let's read the list of must-have items teachers often have or want in classrooms. And that can be found on page 3 of the guide.
And let's assume this is a typical classroom and not a virtual classroom as we move forward with this activity.
Good point, right. All right, let's begin. Decide which one item you would eliminate due to the budget constraints. Perfect. Now, imagine that because of unexpected budget cuts, you must eliminate 2 more items from the list with rank order. Just 2 more. Awesome. Let's come back together, and now I'm going to continue to ask you to make decisions and eliminate even further through rank order. Now, what I want you to do is get down to 5 items that remain on your list. This is going to be hard to do, to mark those out until you're down to the last 5 items based on budget cuts.
So this may seem a little arbitrary, this activity, but this happens a lot. If you cut your budget, or people from downtown, wherever that may be, in central office will call and say to the principal or to the leader, you have $5,000, but you have to spend it by 4 o'clock this afternoon because we're closing that line item. So then decisions have to be made. And so really think about that moving forward.
Yeah, and one more thing to consider, Lorna, is remember to connect your values to what you're eliminating on your list.
Absolutely. It's a really good point, Melinda.
All right, let's start. Great, let's come back together. I hope that wasn't too hard. But you're down to the last 5 items that you would keep. Now, based on your values, I want you to reflect underneath the classroom wish list on page 3 why you chose those items. Just think about how you connected your values to what you eliminated. Take a minute to jot down some ideas.
So Melinda, if I may, one of the things I'd like to point out at this point is that your values are what we're talking about and are most important for your leadership and your leadership development. But sometimes when you're doing activities like this, you have to consider other people's values in your building as well. Once had a teacher tell me they were a social studies department chair that this exact thing happened to them. He had $5,000 and he had to spend it like in an hour, so he couldn't go to the teachers. And he was laughing about it because a year later, there was a closet full of materials that no one used.
Oh, wow.
Because he bought what he would want,
Right.
not what he thought his teachers would want. So one of your values is leading by example. And some of that is how do you make other people better leaders and provide the resources they need to do their job. So it's always something to remember when you're doing activities like this that are real life.
Right. What a great segue to our next section. We're going to take a look at some different scenarios and we're going to think about how our values connect to the decisions that we're making. So let's start with the first scenario. I'm going to read this, and if you'll read this along, then we can talk about what we're going to do. So what would you do? George is a custodian who works from 7 to 3:30 with a 30-minute lunch. George drives his children to childcare in the morning and is 5 to 10 minutes late about twice a month. George's tardiness does not have an adverse impact on the daily operation of the school or on his ability to complete his workload. Now, who knows that George is late about twice a month?
Probably everyone.
Yep, everyone's watching to also see what we're going to do. So what if George being late did have an adverse impact on the daily operations of the school? What would that change and what would you do? Should it change what you would do? And how do your behaviors reflect your values? So let's write down what your decision would be and how you would handle this.
Yeah, start with the first scenario that Melinda read. So that does not have an adverse effect. He's late a couple times a month. He's the custodian. What would you do in that situation before even reflecting on some of the other questions? So take about 3 minutes and write down what you would do with George and what your next steps would be.
Right. In reference page 4 of your participant's guide, you're just completing the top portion. All right, let's come together. I sure would like to hear or read about some of the things that they decided to do, wouldn't you, Lorna?
Oh, I sure would. Absolutely.
Now let's go on to the second part in the middle of our participant's guide on page 4. What if George being late did have an adverse impact on the daily operations of the school? What would that change be like and what would you do?
Would you do anything different if it did have an adverse effect? Reflect on that in your participant's guide for a few minutes.
Let's give you some time to jot down some notes. All right, let's come back together and let's do that one last section and let's respond to that. How do your actions or even your behaviors reflect your values?
So let's talk about this for a second, Melinda.
Okay.
If this were me, one of my values is being on time. And I believe that applies to all employees. I would conference with George to brainstorm other options for not being late. I would ask him questions regarding why this happens twice a month. What can he do to ensure it does not happen? I want my behavior to reflect to others that it is not okay to be late, and I will work with you to help you find solutions.
Wow, that's interesting, Lorna, because one of my values is equity, and I believe that allowing him time to meet his needs is an equitable practice. And I would challenge any staff member to consider how this affects their day-to-day operational success. Then I may suggest how I provide equitable practices to them.
So whatever your response was as a participant in this webinar, remember it's not about good or bad or right or wrong, but it's about aligning to your values and being consistent and having your behaviors reflect your values.
It's awesome, Lorna. Let's do one more. Let's do another scenario. All right, let's look at this scenario. What would you do? One teacher on my staff does a satisfactory job in many ways, but I did not think he was a good fit for our school. I felt he did not share the same philosophy or vision that the rest of us share for our school. Our philosophy is that all students can learn. Our staff takes seriously their responsibilities for finding the correct tools and approaches to ensure that all students progress to the highest level of their abilities. This teacher, however, made it clear that several of his students who had been identified with special needs could not keep up and learn in his class. Often he was negative with those students. The students knew he felt they were difficult and limited. As principal, that did not sit well with me at all. I made suggestions about approaches or materials that he could use or might use, and I encouraged him to read materials by experts in the field, but the desired changes still did not occur. In all fairness to the teacher, his teaching skills as assessed on observation forms and evaluations using our established rubric fell in the satisfactory range overall. He wrote good and detailed plans, and he did a good job with most of his students. I recognized that the observation data I had would not meet our district standards for termination. What would you do? What would be your next steps with this teacher? In the participant's guide, at the bottom of page 5, write what your next steps would be.
Take about 3 minutes to think about what would you do with this teacher?
Now then, I want you to go along on the participant's guide and answer the question, how do your actions reflect your values? Let's take a couple of minutes to do that. Awesome. So as we think about your value system, are you in line with helping teachers grow or go? So let's talk about this scenario, Lorna. One of my values is growing teachers. Because he has met satisfactory in his evaluation, I would work with him the following school year and begin the year with a 90-day plan to support that includes peer support, modeling from our instructional coach, and observation feedback sessions with me as his leader. If no growth has been made during that time, then I would process his termination with HR support. I need to consider what is best for the students at that point.
Well, that's very interesting, Melinda. One of my values is to always do what is best for kids. This teacher is leaving behind an entire subpopulation of students, which is not okay. I would meet with the teacher and have a crucial conversation regarding how he isn't a good fit for the culture at our school. I would encourage him to seek other teaching opportunities for next year.
So again, it's not about right or wrong. It's about your value system.
And absolutely, and how your behaviors reflect your values.
Right. Let's go on to another scenario. So in this one, the principal was excited about incorporating a strong data analysis process into the existing professional learning community, PLC, meeting structure. He felt, for the most part, that PLCs were more like typical meetings rather than having a strong focus on using student learning data to plan and improve instruction and address student learning gaps. It's been several weeks since the training. The reports for the first 9-week interim assessment have just been released to the schools, and the principal is looking forward to attending the various grade level PLCs to watch how teachers analyze the data and make decisions to address student learning needs. The principal then observed one team that was fairly focused and on task, but the rest of the PLC meetings appeared to be business as usual. A lot of talk about the data, but no action. He's very frustrated and is trying to decide what to do next. What would you do? What would be your next steps? Record responses on page 6 of your participants guide. Awesome. I hope you were able to capture some solutions or decisions that you would make based on your value systems. Now I'd like you to move along on your guide and answer the following question. How do your actions reflect your values?
Spend a few minutes recording your answer to this.
Now, Lorna, I want to say it's safe to say that I think you and I have the same value systems and processes for successful organizations to flourish. With that in mind, I would say that we need to go back and look at what processes we have in place.
I agree, Melinda. I think we need to review the processes for the PLCs. I also think we need to consider that more professional development is needed for effective PLCs to occur. There might have just been one training and then he expected them to implement. So that would be something I would look at as well.
Right. So these 3 scenarios are just examples of how you'll incorporate your value system into the decisions that you make as a leader. So we hope that they're helpful. As we continue, we'd like for you to move on to page 7 of your participants guide on value-based leadership. And I'd like for you to take a look at that one chart that says reflections at the top. And I'd like for you to list the 5 most important learning takeaways of today or of part 1.
You can turn to page 9 of your participants guide. There's a couple quotes I'd like to read that are found on this page. The secret to values-based leadership is found when you move from power to people, from pride to humility, from focus on me to focus on us. At the bottom of page 9, values-based leadership is not a destination. Rather, it is a path toward an ideal, and the success is found in the journey. Take a few minutes and list the first 5 steps you will take to begin your journey towards becoming a values-based leader.
Fantastic. So as we come to the culmination of part 2 of values-based leadership, We'd like you to watch this short video that focuses on integrity and values. Wow, we made it to the end of part 2, and I sure hope that this webinar has inspired them to become values-based leaders.
Absolutely. And I encourage you to continue to follow your values and have your behaviors reflect your values.
We are so excited to have been a part of your leadership journey, and we look forward to future collaboration.
Go forth and do great work.
Bye-bye.
The Office of Leadership Development and School Improvement would like to thank you for participating in the Leadership Preparation virtual webinar series. We hope you found this particular webinar informative and beneficial to your work as you prepare as a leader. To access the webinar series and find additional resources, please visit the Maryland Resource Hub. The Maryland Resource Hub can be located at marylandresourcehub.com. That is MarylandResourcehub.com. We appreciate your feedback and would ask that you take a moment at this time to complete the SurveyMonkey link or use the QR code. The feedback that you provide to us will inform our work in the office as we develop additional resources to support you in the field. Again, thank you very much for your time in completing the feedback. As a reminder, the continuing professional development credits are available to you for this leadership preparation webinar series. To receive 1 credit, you will need to view 5 webinars, parts 1 and 2, and complete 3 hours of experience for the webinar. That would include the pre-work, viewing the webinar, and completing the participant's guide, as well as extension activities related to the webinar. To receive 2 CPD credits, you will watch all 10 webinars, parts 1 and 2, and complete 3 hours of experience per webinar. Again, it would include the pre-work, viewing the webinar and completing the participant's guide while watching, and extension activities related to the webinar. After you have completed the work, you will then submit all of the materials to the Google Form link listed. If you need to contact us with any questions for any reason at the Office of Leadership Development and School Improvement, you can contact Ed Mitzel, Executive Director, at edmund.mitzel@maryland.gov. That is edmund.mitzel@maryland.gov, or Dr. Lori Ellis, Coordinator for Leadership Development, at lori.ellis@maryland.gov. That is lori.ellis@maryland.gov.